You can't serve two masters. You can only serve one. It's going to be God or country. It can't be both. There will be moments when they come into conflict, and at that moment, you will prove which one you actually serve.
I'm Mitch.
And I'm Missy.
We're co-workers.
He's the boss, and we're married.
And she's the boss. Together, we host Good Faith Weekly, a podcast on faith and culture.
What could possibly go wrong?
Tune in and find out. Missy. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up and talk about the latest current events. And then later on the pod, Missy and I sat down with the president and editor of Word and Way, Dr. Brian Kaylor. And we're going to talk a little bit about how faith and politics are covered in the press. So it's a great conversation. Stay tuned. I think you're going to enjoy this pod. Hello there, Missy.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm okay. I don't know if you've noticed or not. I've been a little mad at you the last couple days.
Really? The last few days?
The last couple days.
Okay, so what did I do?
So I'm finding it equal parts torturous and exhilarating to save these little nuggets for our listeners.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what I've done.
So I had a dream the other night.
Oh, dear Lord. Did I do something in the dream? Folks, I'm always messing up in her dreams.
True. And in my dream, you, in the middle of the night, got up and decorated the entire house for Christmas.
Oh, and it would have been fabulous.
And when I woke up, there was like a little Christmas tree by my bed, and the house was decorated. And when I woke up, none of that was true.
That's what you were upset about.
That is literally what upset me. So,
well,
I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I've been a little bitter about it.
On behalf of St. Nick and his elves, I apologize for ticking you off in the middle of the night.
Well, that's all right. I'll try to get over it here in a couple of more days.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Well, it's the end of summer. You got any big plans for the end of summer?
No.
I mean, it's pretty much over, isn't it?
Yeah, no, our September is crazy. We're going to be traveling, and so we're going to be recording at weird times, and it'll be interesting. But no, I'm excited to get fall started. I think that is where my Christmas dream came in, is that I'm just ready for holiday season to begin. Yeah. So if you could get on board with me and do something about that, that'd be great.
You know, what's really remarkable, you and I were out doing some shopping the other night, looking for some paint. We're painting an office here at the house, and the Halloween decorations are everywhere right now, even here in August. But then...
No, it's September 2nd, yo.
It isn't... Oh, it is September 2nd. I may be a little out of it on
we'll
this
talk
episode.
About that in a minute.
Okay.
Speaking of paint, though.
Yes.
I don't know if Callie's going to use any of our video or not, but if anybody can tell, I'm wearing my beloved paint shirt.
Oh, you've had that for what, 20 years
This
or something?
is a journal of all the painting I've done over the years, and it's one of my favorite shirts. But I have been painting my office.
Yes.
And I will say that the previous tenant was the jerk that left all of the nail holes, and not just the nail, but the nails in the wall. So as I've been painting...
Well, I thought you could reuse those, repurpose those somehow.
Did you? Yeah. Did you? Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought as I've been digging all of the picture hooks and things.
For the second time in this episode, I am sorry. We're going to start a sub-pod of this pod and just calls it Mitch's Sorry.
That's right. Well, you always say, I'm happiest when
you have something to gripe about.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's I give that to you.
That's right.
I'm a giver. I'm just a giver.
Keep me happy. Right. Audience, we're recording later than usual today. So that may be coming through, I don't know, in our dialogue. But you mentioned earlier you're a little out of it. You had a little bit
of a loopy right now.
A little bit of a procedure today, which required some, what is that called? general anesthetic. I don't
No.
not general. I don't know.
Well, they put me under, just gave me a little sedation and put me under, I think they called it cognitive anesthesia, where you're awake but not awake kind of a deal. At any rate, I had a little procedure today. I went in to see the cardiologist a couple weeks ago. I am north of 50 now and trying to get everything checked out, make sure I'm okay. And so they did a sonogram of my heart a couple of weeks ago, and the cardiologist said, well, there's something going on with one of those valves.
There's something missing.
There's something missing. And I was like, oh, that's not good. He said, so I want to do this T procedure on you. And so went in this morning, early this morning. Thank you for taking me, by the way. And,
that's my third gripe.
I'm not apologizing for that one. But they did the procedure and found out that I have one of my valves is deformed from when I was born. I've had it all my life and had no idea. So I am okay, though. Everything's fine. I'm just going to probably have to check it out or have it checked out when I'm 70 years old, and maybe have to do some work, some upgrading on that.
So while you're still kind of riding the wave of anesthesia,
Yes.
I am putting in a request for money.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. Company money.
Company money for what?
And I'm bringing this to you along with our listeners because I need a little input on this. So get ready. I'm about to do mental gymnastics.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Do I need to get our business manager on the line?
Maybe. You want to clarify how my mental gymnastics work?
Oh, it's remarkable. I mean, she lands a 10 every time from the vault, from the floor. I mean, she just flips and flops. It's amazing. So,
that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready.
We
You're
have
about to be
friends that will
astounded.
literally hold up pretend signs after one of my routines. So here we go. So, I suck at, I stink at taking a compliment, right?
Yes, I do know that.
But in the same time, I love it. So I will say that as people have texted and messaged and reached out and said they're really enjoying the pod, it has just fueled something in me. But at the same time, it's uncomfortable. And so my knee-jerk reaction is to shower them with gifts.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, I do know that.
So as evidence, I'll post a photo of my first positive commenter a few weeks ago, who received a box full of Good Faith Media swag, because that's how I don't know. That's how I accept it. You compliment me, I will shower you with things. So I noticed that our stock of GFM swag in the garage.
Yes, we have a lot of it.
Is getting a little low.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So my thought was, we need some, I think to be a legit podcast, we need Good Faith Weekly swag. Isn't that what makes you a legit podcast?
Yeah.
Like if you have followers, you've got stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know what it's going to be yet,
Mm-hmm.
but I have
Well, why wouldn't there be bobbleheads associated with this?
I don't think they make them that big.
Hey! Ouch!
You walked right into that one.
My heart!
We'll talk about the ring light you ordered in a minute. Okay. So, no, but my thought is I've got 4 or 5, I don't know, people like backlog to send to shower with gifts because they've showered me with compliments.
Yeah.
And so I want to send them things, but I don't know what. So I'm coming to you now as you're maybe still a little foggy on the anesthesia to get you to sign off on my purchase order, but also to maybe ask the audience what we should order. What would be good?
I think that's a great
Good
idea.
Faith Weekly swag.
Yeah. What is a good swag item?
Right. What would you like to get? And also a maybe like passive aggressive plea for compliments and accolades. I'm always here for that.
Just remember, folks, she hates it and loves it at the same time.
And love it at the same time.
Kind of describes our marriage. But nevertheless, let's go on. Let's move forward with the news. Lots going on in the news this week. Since I was under a little bit this morning, I know you kind of worked on our list. So what do you want to talk about?
So there's, per usual, tons of things we need to talk about.
Yeah, the most difficult thing about this job, both at Good Faith Media and Good Faith Weekly, is really trying to decide what not to talk about.
Well, it's really trying to decide which grievances I'm going to air and what news events we're going to talk about.
Okay, so
that's the difficult decision. But
since you're in charge this week, you go ahead.
I feel like in light of our discussion with Brian, that you're going to hear later, which was so important, I wanted to maybe camp out on this topic a little bit because it is so important. We kind of talk about Christian nationalism quite a bit during our interview. And given that you did your doctoral work, on separation of church and state, this is kind of a field or an area that you know quite a bit about. I wanted to clarify for our listeners what patriotism and faith are, how they can exist together, and one does not negate the other.
Correct.
So I wanted you to talk about, because I did not want to leave the impression that we are unpatriotic or not proud of our country or not supportive of the United States or whatever. I want to make sure that we stress that we are proud of our country. We're proud of where we come from. The history, the things that we hold to, we absolutely 100% honor our veterans and people who have given their life to service of country. And so I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Obviously Christian nationalism is front and center right now. Christian nationalism was probably the number one ideology that drove people to invade the Capitol on January the 6th. Former President Trump lit the match, but the ideology was already there. And it's really a myth, to be quite honest with you, Missy. It is the myth that you have to fuse your faith with your political ideology. And the truth of the matter is those who profess Christian nationalism are letting their politics drive their faith. Now, there are a lot of wonderful people in the world who are shaped by their faith, both liberal and conservative, and they allow their faith to shape their politics. And so they come at that as a matter of conscience. But there's also an acknowledgement that they are not alone in this country, and therefore there's rigorous debate about certain issues. And then the lost art these days of compromise should take place, and we move forward as a society. The misnomer is that a lot of people are now believing to be a good Christian, you must also be a good American, and to be a good American, you must be Christian. And that goes against the principles that the founders established at the beginning of this country. Now, what that also does not mean is that because you believe in separation of church and state, and the two should stay separate, it does not mean that you are any less patriotic. I love my country. I love the United States of America. This is a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to raise your children. And it is a jewel within history.
But do you have a Stars and Stripes Speedo? I feel like that's
not.
the measure of how patriotic you are.
There's not going to be a photo of that in the show notes. Nobody wants to see that.
You're welcome.
But no, you and I have talked about this quite extensively. And what I want people to hear is that those people who are critical of the United States, that does not equate to not loving your country.
Right.
Because we must always remember the United States of America is an experiment. Jefferson said it best when he said that we are striving towards a more perfect union. It does not mean that we have ever reached it. But what we're hoping is that we are striving towards that better union as we experiment in this idea of self-government together. Therefore, we must be honest about where we came from and where we are. For example, historically, the United States of America was established by these two things. The lands of this country that you and I live on were stolen from the indigenous people who already lived here.
Right.
And secondly, the economic system that we prosper from was built by slave labor from Africa.
Right.
Saying those two things does not reduce my appreciation for the founders and for the people who began this country. It is just an honest reality of this is who we are, so that we will not make the same mistake. And that's why it's so terrifying when you have these reconstructionists or this whitewashing of history to develop a new mythology to complement their current political ideology. It's again letting your political ideology shape your faith, as well as letting your current political ideology shape a new history to match that. Mm-hmm. So right now, I want our listeners to hear that anytime that we are critical of policy or this country, it's not out of a disdain for the country itself. It's so that we can become a more perfect union and that we can progress and be a better people. That's the most important facet. I can remember, people coming to me all the time when I was a pastor and saying, you criticize Christianity a lot. I say, yeah, I do, because one, it's deserved that criticism.
There's a lot of material to
There's a
work
lot of
with.
material, but it's not because I don't love Jesus. It's because I want people to, understand the teachings of Jesus more. I want to understand the teachings of Jesus more, and I want to be more like Jesus and less like myself, which has a sinful nature. And so we've got to get over this misconception that criticism is somehow hate-driven. It is not, but that doesn't.
Maybe frustration-driven.
Right. It may be frustration-driven, but the goal at the end is that we become a better people and a better country. And yes, we love this country. We appreciate every single one of the men and women who defend this country. We appreciate the men and women who walk the streets of this country protecting us in law enforcement. We appreciate the firefighters. They are doing incredible work. But it does not mean that each one of those institutions, including the church and including the organization that we lead, is not deserving of criticism. Not because that we hate them or they hate us. It's because we're trying to get better.
So all I can think about is when you talked about about using your politics to shape your faith mm-hmm. and your ideology. It's kind of like the Spanx of
oh, dear God.
That's all I can think about is when you don't know this.
I do not.
When women have typically women, although we did learn from
from a prominent pastor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Spanx for men.
How
apparently.
Important it is to wear Spanx in the pulpit.
There's your PSA. But I was just thinking, just wiggling into Spanx to try to fit into the dress. So there you go, folks. There's your mental image. Yeah, and I will say that in getting ready for this, to record this opening, this has just been percolating in my mind. And I kind of asked some friends that we ran across in the last couple of days and thought I would share kind of a fun little quote after your very deep and heavy monologue there. But I was asking somebody, what makes you patriotic, or what was patriotism? And as our very dear friend was kind of wrestling with that and saying, I don't know, how much patriotism I had. And then they said, well, wait. They said, bourbon is one of the greatest things ever invented, and that is distinctly American. So
God bless the USA. Cue Lee Greenwood at this moment.
That's right.
So,
proud to be an American.
That's right. I do want to say this, though, because at the end of the day, and here is kind of the false dichotomy that is being perpetuated in this country, is that you have to choose between your country and your God. If I am ever forced to choose, I am going to utter the same words that Paul uttered when he wrote in his epistles, and that is
that women
Christ.
should be silent.
No, it's not. No. Well, right now I'm kind of thinking that's okay. But
Every now and again, I remember my Bible, and it works out for me.
That's right. No, what he wrote was this, and it's so simple, and we gloss over it every time, but we must remember he was making a political statement, and that statement is this: Christ is Lord. Because in every coin in the Roman Empire, it had Caesar is Lord. I will never, ever bow to the empire. No matter how much I love this country, I will never bow to empire because Christ is my Lord and I exist outside of these institutions. It doesn't mean I don't appreciate them and love them, but I must always recall those words: Christ is Lord, not Caesar.
Right. And as I was kind of mulling about, to follow up on my earlier fun comment, I was thinking about patriotism and love of country and faith. And this exists outside of the Christian faith as well. And I was telling you just before we started recording that over the last several years, anytime I've been frustrated or at my wit's end and I think there's no hope and, something happens, whatever it is that just makes me feel so dejected in our country, the person who generally speaks to me
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
is not you.
Oh.
But that's one of our favorite people in the world, and that's Ahmad, and Chauncey. And I know
absolutely.
we refer to him all the time, but he really just is that phenomenal of a person. But he grew up as a refugee in Beirut and came to...
We published his memoir, Cloud Miles. You
We
can pick that up
did.
at goodfaithmedia.org.
We did. He just... he's hysterical, and funny people are just my favorite people. But he always comes to the table or to social media in times of darkness with just the most encouraging words. As someone who grew up as a refugee in Beirut and then came to the United States as a young adult, he always talks about his love of this country. Mm-hmm. And it's always such a great reminder and a reset of, like you said, we are searching for a more perfect union. Right. That doesn't mean we've gotten it right.
Correct. And
that does mean we have things that we have to acknowledge and deal with, but we want to become more perfect. We want this experiment to continue because there's always room for improvement.
Absolutely. Very well said. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Missy and I sat down with the editor and president of Word and Way this week, Dr. Brian Kaylor, and we talk about Christian nationalism. We talk about coverage in the press of faith issues and denominationalism. And so it's a really good conversation. I think you'll be interested in it. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey listeners, check us out online at goodfaithmedia.org and follow us on social at gfmedia.org. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. I'm new here and could really use the feedback, but only if it's glowing. Thanks for listening.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a friend to Good Faith Media, Brian Kaylor. He is the Word and Way editor and president since 2016, an award-winning writer and sought-after expert on...
Is he really?
What did I just say?
Lots of people saying they were the president since 2016 these days, Mitch.
He is the president. I've seen the documents. He's got them hidden right there in his basement.
Gotcha. Sorry. Carry on.
He's an expert on issues in religion, politics, and communication. He also hosts an award-winning podcast, Baptist Without an Adjective. In addition to articles and editorials for Word and Way, his writings have been published by CNN, Houston Chronicle, Kansas City Star, Louisville Courier-Journal, RNS, Roll Call, and a host of others, including the Washington Post. Brian has a PhD and an MA in communication from the University of Missouri and a BA in communication and Christian ministry from Southwest University. Brian, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So I'm sorry about my partner in crime here. Every now and again,
so I was elected literally 1 week to the day after the 2016 presidential election. And so like my entire tenure at Word and Way has been dealing with issues of Christian faith in this really bizarre era that we have been in, thanks to a certain somebody.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, the president who will go nameless. Well, Brian, we are excited that you are here. You've been a friend of Baptist Center for Ethics and Ethics Daily, and also a friend of Good Faith Media. It's been way too long. We appreciate you coming on the show. One of the things that we really want to kind of talk about, first of all, before we get into kind of your expertise on some issues, is there are a lot of our listeners who may not be familiar with Word and Way. So tell us a little bit about the work at Word and Way, and what you guys are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that opportunity to plug. We've been around since 1896, actually, and we're still in print. We have a monthly magazine still as part of that legacy. And we started with this vision of being unconnected to a denomination, covering Baptists, both North and South at the time. Regionally across the Midwest, we had writers and editors at the turn of the last century in multiple states and territories, including, the Oklahoma and Indian territories back at the time. We already had writers and editors out in those areas.
After McGriff, we still call it Indian Territory now.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and then eventually Oklahoma Baptist started their own paper, and we kind of lost most of our subscribers. But then we used to be the paper for your area even. And then we went through a period where we were the official Southern Baptist Convention state publication in Missouri for about 55 years, after 50 years of being independent. And then a couple of decades ago, we went back to our roots. And so we are back to being independent Baptist publication, looking at a wide variety of Baptist and Christian life. We now have podcasts, as you noted, Baptist Without an Adjective. We've also launched Dangerous Dogma, which is a broader conversation with Christians outside the Baptist world. And we have an email newsletter that we launched about a year and a half ago called A Public Witness. And it particularly focuses on the intersection of faith and politics. Deep dives, long form reporting on a lot of the craziness that's happening in our society right now.
Yeah. Well, it's great. It's wordandway.org for anybody who wants to check it out. But you've been editor and president since 2016. And speaking about all of this coverage, since 2016, or even before that, Brian, in your career, because you've covered faith and politics for a long time, what is probably the most important story that you have ever covered or told in your career?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, if you think about big picture happening in our society, and then I'll give you two answers. Big picture, I mean, I really do think the biggest story, the most important story has been the last president and the relationship with the church, particularly January 6th. I mean, I don't think we can underestimate how significant that still is. I am constantly watching church services, conservative Christian gatherings, and listening to the way that they're continuing to talk about the former president, about January 6th. And we're not out of the woods yet. I mean, this is a clear and present danger to our democracy, to our faith. I would say on a more, small personal level, because that's a story that lots of people have covered.
Sure.
The story that I'm probably most excited about that I have been able to accomplish in these last few years has been, I told a story of my own undergraduate university. I've told two different stories. One story has been all of the politics and unfortunately the schools falling apart and lost their accreditation because of, some of the stuff that I was reporting about. But the other story I told was a story about the history of the school that I went to, and the history of embedded and hidden racism and the impact this has had. And I really, I can't get into the full story here in this little segment, but being able to tell these stories to help us in our white churches and our white institutions reckon with the parts of our past that we've never told before, I think is something that hard work that we need to all be doing in our own churches and institutions. And that story went on to win, some significant awards. And so I'm particularly proud of the impact that has had in wrestling with my own past institutions' problems with racism.
And you just illustrated the most important facet, in my opinion. Well, there's a lot of important facets, but one of the most important facets is preserving these stories, because especially we're seeing it firsthand right now, this whitewashing of history, the reconstructionism of history. And faith-based journalism and organizations like Word and Way and Good Faith Media that try to hold a high standard of integrity and truth-telling. That's why it's so important to have organizations like ours around. And so you did a fabulous job with that story. I know exactly what you're talking about, and well done, sir.
So, Brian, as we've noted that your work centers around kind of faith and politics, and I don't know if you've heard, but Christian nationalism is kind of a buzz term right now. And I was wondering, one, have you heard of it? Give us your thoughts on Christian nationalism in general a little bit, but also talk to us about how people of faith can help combat it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is a really significant topic, and I'm excited that people are talking about it now, right? I mean, Mitch, this when our friends at the Baptist Joint Committee launched Christians Against Christian Nationalism back in the summer of 2019. I mean, talk about being prophetic. Mm-hmm. Some people are like, "Oh, you all just made this term up about January 6th." So like, no, people have been talking about this for years. This really is the issue in our moment. I think for Christians who are concerned about the integrity of our faith, this is the danger, because anything that tries to conflate the Christian identity, the gospel witness, with one nation, as if you have to be a good Christian to be a good American and a good American to be a good Christian, that is dangerous. It undermines the basic understanding of the gospel that we have been taught and that we are called to preach. And so I think that Christian nationalism is something that all Christians need to be speaking out against. Now, how we do it, of course, is the more difficult part, because, we're now entering this phase where some of those who have been espousing Christian nationalism are embracing the term as a badge of honor. And like, I'm a Christian nationalist and I'm proud of it. We have, members of Congress who are selling T-shirts about being a proud Christian nationalist. We have individuals like Al Mohler, who after January 6th criticized the idea of Christian nationalism, and now is embracing the term and saying that he is a Christian nationalist, right? And so that's actually concerning, that we're seeing this embrace of this ideology. And I think we have to get back to this idea that you can't serve two masters.
There you go.
You can only serve one. It's going to be God or country. It can't be both. There will be moments when they come into conflict, and at that moment you will prove which one you actually serve. Yeah.
So,
and for me, the connection with the global church has also been, right, I think, the best way of combating Christian nationalism. I mean, we've all been at Baptist World Alliance meetings, and they're so significant to my faith, and to realizing that, there's so much more out there besides American Christianity. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to help more people to hear and to see.
So do you feel like right now, with more attention being paid to in labeling Christian nationalism, I would say there were elements of that, in my childhood growing up in the Bible Belt and in church, when you have, of course, the flag and the sanctuary, and it was kind of undertones of that. Now I feel like we've done a better job of naming what this is. Do you feel like now that we've recognized it, is the momentum there to ramp up, or are voices like ours having any impact in calling this out for what it is? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's definitely the hardening of positions, right? So we're getting the people that are embracing it as a badge of honor, but we're having conversations about, removing the flag from sanctuaries. And I know some pastors who have taken that move in recent years. And that used to be, the third rail.
Did any of them keep their jobs?
Yeah, exactly. Because we've also heard stories of pastors that got fired for removing that, which is a clear sign that something is an idol.
Sure.
If you can't remove it without losing your job, it's an idol.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, the Christian nationalism, it was in the air that we breathed growing up in a white Christian church. It was there on stage as the flag. It was in the section of our hymnal with the national anthem, a bunch of, quote, patriotic hymns, right? And, it was a few years, I was a part of a Mennonite congregation in Virginia for about 6 years. And it was the first 4th of July that I came back home after being in the Mennonite church for a few years. And I was at a Baptist church, and they started doing all the patriotic hymns. And it was like, I grew up with that, and it seemed normal. But then after being out of that environment for a few years, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, who are we worshiping? And so, now instead, since I am a member of a Baptist church, I go camping or, go to a BWA meeting or something. I skip church on the 4th of July because I can't do it. I just can't deal with it. Even our moderate progressive Baptist churches, right, are still struggling with this.
Absolutely.
And so, we're having some great conversations. I do think that's helpful, but man, there is so much more work that needs to be done.
And that's what's so disconcerting to me, Brian, is that, at one time it felt like this was a bit of a fringe movement because, you mentioned some people who, are more radical in their voices, their rhetoric, their belief system. But what we always knew is that there was an underlying belief that existed within our churches, even within our moderate to progressive churches, of this hint of Christian nationalism. And now we're seeing it becoming mainstream and almost populist. And to me, that's what is terrifying, because you do hear individuals like Mohler embracing the term now, and how many others are going to start embracing it and see this as a political religious movement that calls them to arms. And so that's what's terrifying to me at this point.
So how do organizations like ours get this message out? To be, a person of faith is not to be a Christian nationalist.
Yeah, I think the problem that we have, comparative to say the early church leaders, is that the religion of the empire, the false doctrine, is the dominant one in our culture that we are trying to, get people to repent and follow Jesus from, uses the same term that we use. Right? So when Paul and Peter are preaching against the cult of the empire, they're saying, hey, come follow the way of Jesus, or, they start calling themselves Christians. When we try to get people to be Christians, they think I am already a Christian, right? The cult of the empire is using the same label to describe its religion as what we're using. And so it's really hard, one, to help people understand what is American in their churches and what is Christian, right? Separating the wheat and the chaff from to help them understand what's different. But then the other problem we have is that we live in an outrage culture, as you're noting. That, when you try to be a civil person, when you try to love people like Jesus loves, when you try to, say to treat people like they're actually a human being made in the image of God, no matter how much you may disagree with them, right? That doesn't get the headlines and the clicks and, the attention. And so it's this idea of how do we not lose our own humanity? How do we not lose our own values and our principles, and yet also get our message out? And that's I don't know. I don't have a great answer to that. We're in a difficult place. We just have to keep pushing ahead and trying to reach a few more people, but it's the slow road.
Yeah. And a friend of ours, a friend of yours, the late Babs Ball, used to tell me all the time, we moderates and progressives are just too damn nice. Because it's in our nature not to quarrel or to be mean and ugly about things. And so I think she had a valid point there, and what you're saying is exactly right. You mentioned Al Mohler earlier, this article that you wrote for B&G, which was extraordinary. I wonder if we are finally getting some attention, because our friends at the BJC, we see Amanda now on NBC or MSNBC on CNN. There are avenues like podcasting, like you're doing, like we're doing. We're talking about this in other arenas, and I am hoping that there are people out there who may have had that small element of Christian nationalism within them, but now see where that type of belief is headed, and are looking for an alternative ways. And hopefully they'll find resources like Word and Way and Good Faith Media and Baptist News Global and Baptist Joint Committee, so that they can educate themselves about how dangerous this is, and that we need to be Jesus followers and not serve two masters, like you said a moment ago.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. Obviously, I'm really excited by the attention that Amanda, Tyler, and the BJC are getting on Christian nationalism. That's encouraging. But boy, it's still so hard to, as I write about, this is a piece that I've been kind of toying with writing for a few years, honestly. And then I just had a moment where I was just really irritated. And so I sat down and finally typed it out after being at the CBF meeting and the BWA meeting. And, these were newsworthy events with significant speakers, things that were happening that were worth covering, and crickets, right? I mean, the mainstream media, even the media that covers religion, I write this piece and, it's about ready to run, and it's the week after the Baptist World Alliance meeting. And not only did the BWA not get any coverage outside of a couple of, Baptist publications, but then, a leading publication that I criticized in the piece, Religion News Service, they run yet another profile about the SBC president that was, just like 4 weeks after the last profile they ran about him after his election. It's like, so not only are they not covering this meeting, they're still rehashing and telling us the same old story from a month ago. Right. And so, yeah, I see what you're seeing with the pockets of hope, but I'm more irritated than I am hopeful at the moment.
So in light of that and wanting to bring more attention to these other, outside of the Southern Baptist Convention, kind of Baptist communities that are doing, good work. Tell us a little bit about BWA for our listeners who may not know what that is.
Yeah, so the Baptist World Alliance brings together Baptists from around the world and meet every year. And so if you look at the Baptist bodies that are in the United States that are in the Baptist World Alliance, there are more Baptists there than there are in the Southern Baptist Convention. So while the SBC is the largest Protestant denomination, they're not even half of Baptists in the United States. And so they do get this, outside attention. And so this year's meeting was in Birmingham, Alabama, which wasn't as exciting of a location to go to as we normally get to go to. But, sometimes we're going around the world to other countries, and Alabama in July is not necessarily on my bucket list, but nonetheless, right. The meeting itself was fantastic. I mean, we had Alan Bozak, the anti-apartheid South African theologian and activist, was literally imprisoned for his preaching and proclamation and activism there, and spoke multiple times. Went down to Montgomery for the Legacy Museum and the Slavery Monument there, which are two just amazing experiences. Also hear from Brian Stevenson, who is an incredible speaker and has done so much important work. And so I'm hearing all of these speeches, and then the Baptist World Alliance passes a resolution on reparations, encouraging slavery reparations, encouraging conventions and churches to investigate their own past ties and then make reparations to make amends for that. This is a significant statement coming from global Baptists, and it got absolutely no attention. But, the BWA is in many ways why I am still Baptist. It's what energizes me. It's where my faith is strengthened and challenged more than any other place. And I would really encourage all of your listeners to learn more about the Baptist World Alliance, go to a meeting sometime. Particularly every 5 years, there's a bigger gathering. And so in 2025, it will be in Australia. So you can start making plans to gather with thousands of Baptists from around the world to worship together, to hear amazing preaching, challenging, Bible studies, take communion together as a global family. It really is what's the best thing about Baptists these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage all denominations, people who are part of other denominational congregations, to get involved in a global effort, because it is a reminder how insulated we are here in the United States. You begin to hear different perspectives, and they look at even theological questions differently and life questions differently than we do here in the States. And so I agree with you. I was supposed to go to Birmingham, and COVID took me off my feet. So I dearly missed being with all of those people. Well, Brian, you have been, as always, a delight and a joy. We appreciate you taking time with us here at Good Faith Weekly. Brian Kaylor is the editor and president of Word and Way. You can find more information about Word and Way at wordandway.org. But Brian, before we let you go.
So Brian, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." In light of your work and all that we've talked about today, what is your more to tell?
One of the guiding things for me is are we going to leave this world better off for the next generation? And so for me, it is very personal, right? I have a son. He's in 5th grade. And so, I'm concerned about a lot of things in our society right now. We have our mass shootings in schools. We have the violent rhetoric. We have the assaults on our democracy. And we have, churches are in decline, and, biblical literacy is down, all these things. And so, that motivates me and inspires me to keep doing the work, because I want him to be able to live to his fullest potential, and those in his generation to be able to do so as well. And so we've got to really clean the mess up that we've made, because we're not leaving them a great place right now.
Very well said. We echo those words as well. We've got 2 adult sons, and we're constantly, I feel I'm apologizing all the time these days, because I apologize to them. I'm so sorry. So, well
it is
said,
more
my
your
friend.
generation's fault than mine. I'm going to say that. Yeah, we always blame the ones up. So.
That's right. Well, Brian, thanks for joining us here at Good Faith Weekly. Again, you are an amazing leader, writer, and educator. Thank you so much for all you do at Warden Way.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.